Welcome back to the Prosperous Life Podcast, everyone, and thank you so much for showing up. Today we have a special guest, Kody Duncan. Cool thing about Kody Duncan is that he's graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology from BYU. We've never had anybody with a psychology degree on before, so this will be exciting. Also, huge achievement is he started coaching and presenting at the age of 16 to large audiences. And ultimately, his biggest goal at this time is to help people, at least 1,000 people minimum, to better their habits. So excited to have you, Kody, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So habits, what inspired you to want to help people specifically with their habits?
Yeah. Well, it really kind of started when I was in college. My wife and I had been married for a little over a year, and we were pregnant with our first child, and probably about 5 months pregnant. And I really was wanting to prepare to be a good dad. Responsibility is like a big deal to me, and I want to do a good job at the things that I do. And like, what more important thing to do a good job in life than like with your children? Because, that's kind of important. And so, and honestly, I was kind of scared. I honestly was kind of scared of being a dad and the responsibility and the not knowing what to expect and how I would do it. Because I, as a middle child and with, the two siblings that I had, I just don't really have many memories growing up taking care of babies or toddlers or children. And so for me, I felt like I was going with no experience, like into the abyss, and just didn't know really what to expect. My wife came from a family of 10 kids. So, she had all the experience she needed. She was the second oldest there, but I really felt like I needed that help. So I was doing a lot of education and seeking out books and podcasts and anyone I could learn from of how I could be a better parent. Even though I know a lot of the advice I was reading was like for when you have teenagers or things like that. I was like, whatever I can get, I'll take it. And one day I was out on this run and I was just thinking about, at this point we knew it was a girl. So I was thinking about this daughter that I hadn't met yet and, what she might be like. And just being, excited, but nervous and all the feels. And I started thinking about what I hoped she would grow up to be one day. And I thought about, I hope that she loves to help people. And I hope that she loves learning. And I hope that she, wants to work hard and do good things in her life and, set goals. And I hope that she, does all these different things. And I kind of was making this big list in my mind and just imagining this daughter growing up and like, wow, she's going to be so awesome, And then as I was sitting there pondering this, it just hit me like straight to the core, like a ton of bricks. Oh my gosh. If I ever have hopes that she become anything that I'm imagining right now, who would be more responsible to be her example than myself? And the things that I was imagining and describing were really at least a couple steps above where I was living in that moment. Not that I was doing, terribly bad things, but I knew that there was a couple areas, more than a couple in my life that I could improve in, that I wasn't quite where I wanted to be, and how I managed my time, and how much time I spent, studying and my physical activity. Even though in this story I was on a run, I wasn't consistently exercising, just all these different areas where I knew that there was a gap between where I was and where I wanted my daughter to be when she grew up. And that meant there was also a gap between where I was and where I needed to be her example and just show her the way. Because if it's not me, I can't rely on other people or the world that they're going to be her good examples. I don't know if you guys, have taken notice, but here on earth, there's a lot of crazy people. There's a lot of people out there that aren't the best influence of how I want my daughter to grow up and become like. And so I really just took that responsibility very personally, and that I've never forgotten that. And that still to this day fuels me. She's now almost turning 4. Next month she'll be 4. And she's still, I also have a son who's 2, and both of them are still one of my biggest motivations, if not the biggest motivation, to want to be a better person and to have those better habits so that I can, live a long life and be healthy and be a good influence on them and leave behind a legacy. So that's really kind of where it started. And then, then I delved into more studies and education, of course, in my degree, and then also outside just my own personal studies of stuff. But that's kind of the deepest why that got me started.
They say, and they correlate it to a lot of people I listen to, money, but they say if you want to make the most money you want to, have a kid, because it inspires you to get up early, go to bed later, to really show up fully and become that best version of yourself.
Yeah.
And you're right. If kids are looking up to one person, it's their caregivers, to say the least.
Yep. Exactly. And as they start to grow, you start to notice how they pick up your bad habits, and it's like, oh crap, I need to be better. It's like, oh shoot, they're already learning from me. Okay, I got to fix that.
I got to ask, what's one bad habit that you recognize them picking up from you?
Oh man, that's funny. So this one's like not terrible, but like, not that it's like a full on curse word, but I say freaking a lot. And to hear my 3-year-old say freaking every time about that, she probably is a different word,
That is too funny. That's fair to say. So I assume you switched that one, right?
So actually, this is a funny one. So as a family, we kind of decided okay, instead of freaking, we're going to say jinkies, jinkies, I just thought it would sound cute for my kids to say that. And funny for us to say it. So anyways, we started doing that, and it totally caught on. Our daughter she would say it. It was a laugh. And then if she'd catch us, this is the funniest part. She would catch us, if we'd say it on accident, it would just come out freaking whatever. She'd be like, oh, mommy, we don't say freaking, or dad, say freaking. And then the other funny part was she got really proud of herself, because we keep teaching her hey, honey, we know that we say that word sometimes, but really we need to say jinkies instead, And so she was like, okay, so she learned and everything. But then when she would say jinkies, she'd go, hey, I said jinkies, I didn't say freaking. And then of course by that she's saying freaking again. But she was so proud of herself, for saying the right word, which was really funny.
That's awesome. Got to celebrate those small wins, right? So as we talk about habits, I think this is an amazing topic, especially because January is coming up, right? New Year's resolutions, which this is just my personal opinion. I know I'm never going to get the whole world to change New Year's resolutions. I'm not a fan of them, but to be with the world, we have to talk about them, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people after, 2, 3, 4 weeks, they quit. And I firmly believe that's the only way to fail, is giving up. Because if you consistently show up, it's not a matter of if, it's then a matter of when.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about willpower.
Okay.
Because most people are motivated come January 1st, right? But that goes away.
Yes. Yeah. So this is a fascinating topic. Honestly, one of my favorite things to talk about. And this was actually also kind of a big eye-opener moment that made me even more fascinated in habits, was when I started learning about willpower, which was studying at BYU. One of my professors, Dr. Diane Tice, she's amazing. If you are listening and you happen to be at BYU or in the psychology department, tell her I said hi. She's incredible and you'll love her classes. Her and her husband are actually her husband is Roy F. Baumeister. They're both some of the world's leading researchers on willpower. They've done literally they've participated in hundreds of studies on the topic of willpower. Just so much gold in what they've learned through those studies. And so in the social psychology class, she'd often share with us some of those studies. And then one day, Dr. Baumeister actually came and gave a speech all about New Year's resolutions. And what he said blew my mind and is really one of the foundation pieces of everything I believe about habits. And it's kind of created the paradigm that everything else I learned about habits fits in some place in reference to what he taught this day, which was that what's the typical situation? January 1st comes, a lot of people are thinking about it the week leading up to it, or maybe on January 1st, you write up what your resolutions are. But sometime around then, you're usually writing up a list, right? We're making our list, of everything that we want to be, everything we want to do and achieve. And it's probably things like, okay, I want to work out every day for an hour at the gym. I want to, read a book every month. And I want to save this much money. And I want to finally start that business. And I want to, just the list goes on. And you'll have all these different things kind of pile up. And then you'll start making your plan of like, okay, so I've got to do the gym in the morning. And then after, I'm going to come back and I'm going to read for an hour. And then I'm going to do this. And, you start to see how that's going to fit into your day. And you feel motivated. You feel excited because it's this new, fresh start. It's a new year. And there's just this contagious excitement around that time. Gyms really benefit from this. They get a lot of around then. But any gym will tell you that, just like you said, that usually after literally just 2 weeks, it dies down again, And so why does that happen? So that contagious energy, that excitement can get you going for a couple days. But willpower is like a muscle. And, if you and I walked into a gym right now, there would be only a certain point at which we no longer could lift more weight. Let's say, we're doing a bench press or something, we could add more weight to it and keep trying. But at some point, there's going to be a point at which you or I could no longer lift the bar, right? Because it's too much weight for what our muscles currently are. That doesn't mean we couldn't eventually lift the bar by coming into the gym every day and exercising at the level that we are at. So we'd have to take off a little bit of weight and do lots of reps and come in every day or multiple times a week consistently for time, a month, couple months, few months. And it's amazing how much your muscles can grow and you can increase your strength over weeks and months. But it doesn't happen in a single day. You don't wake up and snap your fingers and suddenly, 2 seconds ago, I could only lift 200 pounds, but now I can lift 300 pounds. That just doesn't happen, But that's essentially what we are expecting our brains to do when we go from our regular patterns we've been doing for an entire year or maybe even our entire lives. And then we get to January 1st and decide, well, it's January 1st, so I should just be able to do all of these new things today, right? But we're not there yet. We're showing up and saying, all right, throw 500 pounds on the barbell. I'm ready. It's like, what? Our internally, our subconscious is like, nice try. Our excitement might get us through a few days of this, but we can't sustain this. It might be almost like comparable to adrenaline in exercise. Adrenaline can physically make you do things that you might not normally be able to do. That's kind of like our that excitement or that hype. Hype's a good word for it. That hype is kind of like adrenaline to your willpower, where you can push through and maybe do things you wouldn't normally be able to do with your current level of willpower. But eventually that hype dies out, and then you'll fall off because you don't have that willpower yet to carry you through doing all of these new habits or all these new things every single day. So what Dr. Baumeister said that totally blew my mind is such a simple paradigm shift, was he said, it's fine if you want to make a list. By all means, make your list. But then choose one thing to start with. Literally just start with one thing and spend all of January working on that one thing. And then at the end of January, beginning of February, you check in with yourself and you go, how'd this go? Did I get to where I wanted to be? Is this now a habit? Or, is this now part of my life? Or if it's just a specific goal or achievement, did I get what I wanted to get? And it's like, if you are, great. Then for February, move to the next item on the list and then focus on that one thing. And literally just spread your list across the year. Because does it matter if your list is just what you want to accomplish? Does it matter if it all happens in January or if it happens across all the months? If really your goal is just to do all those things in that year, right? And when it comes down to the science of it, you're way more likely to actually get through that list. I mean, obviously we can't see your hands right now. Just like raise your hand. Have you ever been able to do everything on your New Year's resolutions? Like most people probably not, you know. I see myself like, yeah, most of the time in the traditional way of doing New Year's resolutions, most of the time it just doesn't happen. And so it just based on science, you are far more likely to be able to do that list when you distribute it across all the months of the year. And if you need more time on a particular one, let's say you go through a whole month and you're not quite where you wanted to be, take another month on it. You know, if your goal is to have sustainable, real change in your life, you have to give yourself time to build up that willpower. And so that's why, you know, where I say willpower is like a muscle, it can build up. And so you build, you know, if let's say all of your New Year's resolutions are new habits. They aren't always for a lot of people, but let's say every one of them in one way or another is a new habit. As soon as you've really established the first habit in January, and it truly is a habit where you don't have to think about it, then your willpower, that mental strength, is freed up again to be able to do the next thing you're going to focus on in February. But when you pile them all on top of each other in 1 month and expect yourself to somehow be able to do them all at once, you drain yourself, you burn out, you get mad at yourself, you feel guilty, you feel embarrassed because you just paid for this gym membership, maybe even a long-term commitment, and now you're not showing up. And then you're, you know, guilted into it, but you're not showing up. And if it's not a gym membership, whatever it is that you committed to, and then you're mad at yourself because another year in a row, you failed what you said you're going to do. And then you just want to give up. And it's like, well, forget it then, because I never succeed anyways. Why make a goal at all? Why try and be better? You know, and if you haven't been there before, that's kind of where that leads if you keep burning yourself out like that. So don't burn yourself out. You know, give yourself time and just give yourself that system of spreading it across the year to allow yourself to gradually increase your strength and willpower, and you'll be able to do it.
I agree with that 100%. I love that. And it kind of brings me back to standards also, right? That one at a time. Do you follow Ed Milet? So Ed Milet has this metaphor, and I'm sure he got it somewhere else, right? Ultimately, like me, I'm just compiling all the 20 coaches I follow in my life and putting it into my own, right? But he talks about the thermostat. You know, you set your thermostat to, let's say, 70. And then a huge gust of heat comes into the room and raises it to 90. That room is automatically going to go back down to 70% or 70 degrees. So if your habit for, let's just say, working out is at 70%, but then, like you mentioned, new year, I'm going to go straight to 100. Well, you can for a short amount of time, but if your subconscious is set at 7 degrees, you're going to automatically come down to the 70 degrees.
Yeah.
So if we can slowly say, you know what, instead of 70 degrees next month, I'm going to get to 80 degrees, and we actually raise that standard, we can actually maintain that for a longer period of time instead of just for that short burst.
Exactly. Or even 71%. Even if that's all you have is to increase 1% of whatever you're doing, that is absolutely phenomenal and monumental. There's actually this chart that a graph, I should say. There's a graph that James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, put together in a blog post where he talks about improving by 1%. And he actually did the math of compounding 1% improvements over an entire year. If you get 1% better each day after a year, you're something like 37% better by the end of the year. If you get 1% worse every day from wherever you're at, by the end of the year, you have decreased down to close to 0% on whatever you're doing. You know, and so it's just interesting the way that the math works out there. 1% seems so insignificant, but when you spread that out over a year, even if it's just 1% better, that compounds to be 37% better. Like, Like imagine any area of your life. If you were 37% better, what would that look like? You know, but that means starting at just, okay, today, what can I do today to be 1% better than I was yesterday?
Yeah, those small increases are dramatic, and it creates you to really be an extraordinary person, and bringing it back to you and being the person you wanted to be for your daughter. So your daughter had somebody to look up to. 5 months. So what? I'm not a dad. So pregnancy was what, 9 months, 8 months?
9 months. Yeah.
So you had 4 more months. Even if you were getting 1% better for the next 4 months, you were that much closer to being the person you wanted to be for your daughter.
Totally. Yeah.
I love that. So this comes into also happiness, right? Because average person, and on this podcast, obviously we're not speaking to that average person, but a lot of times people stop showing up because they're not fulfilled. They're not happy. They go 2 weeks and then they quit, and then they have that guilt, and then they feel shameful, and then they quit, and then they don't feel happy, which causes anxiety, depression, whatever, these really in-depth emotions. Let's talk about happiness for a little bit. What, are we in control of that? Are we not in control of that?
Yeah, good question. So I'd love to start actually with like, what do people think about happiness? What do people think is going to make them happy? And where do we get that information? We watch movies, we watch shows, we hear from media, we hear from people what they tell us. And what's like the common consensus is like, oh, well, if you're a famous influencer, if you make like a ton of money, and if you have a big house and a fancy car and all these things, that's what's going to make you happy. And even those of us that consciously can hear that and go, oh, that's dumb, we still fall into that trap though, because it's so ingrained in us. Even when we're aware of like, oh, that's silly, I know that that's not where happiness comes from, we still end up having behaviors in our life where we are prioritizing, that just the money's going to, maybe we're like, oh, I'm not going to be a millionaire, but man, if I just got, a 5% raise, then I'd be happy. And we think that's different. We think that's different than like, oh, well, I know that being filthy rich won't make me happy, but that 5% raise, that's really what's going to make me happy. If I just made this much. What's interesting is that there's actually been a lot of research done about basically our ability to influence our happiness and what those different factors are. So, and this is broken down in percentages. So you can imagine it like a pie chart of different portions of the pie that are within or not within our control. The three main things that they boil this down to that are the main factors in influencing our happiness are circumstances, like all the things we've mentioned so far. It's not that they don't have any influence. They do have an influence. Circumstances can impact our levels of happiness. If you're dirt poor compared to, having money, sure, that does make some level of influence. So that's one of them, circumstances. Another one is our genes, our genetics. There are certain things, if you're born with a severe physical disability, or because of your genes, you end up having some kind of terminal illness or something, like, yeah, that could mess with you, that can affect you. And then third is our choices, basically, and how the activities we engage in on a daily basis, basically, is the third one. So circumstances, genes, and our choices and activities. And I was shocked when I found out that what the research suggests here is that circumstances only contribute to about 10% of our happiness. 10%, that's it. Genes, I was surprised how much influence they had. Genes, if I remember correctly, is 50%. And then, actually, no, I think genes is 40%. The 40 and 50, I get mixed up, but basically it's circumstances is 10. We'll say genes is 40, and then our choices is 50%. I believe that's where it at, with give or take 10%, But basically we have between 40 and 50% total control over changing our happiness. Where most people, I shouldn't say most people, many people in the world right now feel that their happiness is the victim of other people's decisions. And well, I'll be happy when you do this for me. I'll be happy when someone else pays me this much money. I'll be happy when the government blah, blah, blah. I'll be happy when, other people change the way they are, or the world changes, then I will be happy. When the research is sitting here saying, well, guess what? Even if you're in the worst government in the world, even if you have terrible, genetics that, put you at a predisposition for so many other difficulties and disorders, turns out still 40 to 50% of your happiness is entirely within your control. You can't change those other things, sure. But about half of your level of happiness is entirely within your control. And that's the area where you want to focus. And this is where people end up struggling with happiness, is they are focusing, let's say 80% of their efforts on changing their circumstances. They want to get the better job. They want to, be famous. They want to get in a big house. They want to have the nice car. They want to be in a relationship. Even that is part of this. They think, oh, well, if I get in a relationship, if I get married, or if I get a girlfriend or whatever, then I'll be happy. And even that, studies show that, in the beginning, there's a boost in happiness. But just like you were saying with the thermostat, people tend to come back to a base level of happiness, more or less, and there's even things to combat that, where you can bring variety and novelty into the relationship that helps to keep that happiness kind of spiking, and going up. But overall, still, any time when we think that depending on changing our circumstances is going to create long-term happiness, science is just telling us it just won't. All the research is pointing to it just is not going to. I think the only like redeeming thing there that there is some weight to, that they've said, is up to there's a little bit of difference of, like, depending on which research you look at, but anywhere between $70,000 to $80,000 or so. They say up to that point, there's a minimal increase. There's a little bit of influence, and yes, like having a little bit more money as far as just base quality of living, kind of being able to cover those basic costs and things like that. Little increases there, yes, can have little increases in your happiness. Even then, though, the biggest chunk, like, even if that's true, you have to remember that's still circumstances which only affects 10%. So it's like, if you could focus on the 10% trying to change your circumstances, or focus on the 50% that you have 100% control over, like, just which logically makes more sense to put your effort into, and obviously it's your choices and the activities you engage in.
And I really love that you say that, because as we become more, I always talk to this point, if we can become more, we can achieve more also, right? Yeah. So if you focus on that 50% of your choice of how you're showing up, you become more as an individual.
Exactly.
Which allows you to achieve more, whether that's money or being the influence you wanted on your kids or an audience, or so on and so forth.
100% agree. And that's where I like to talk about those different percentages, that, like, okay, so the activities and choices you have 100% direct control over. The circumstances you have somewhat control over, because of, like, maybe what a job you apply for, where you're choosing to live. There's different things where you have some control over, but you maybe can't just, like, snap your fingers and say, this is my circumstance, but there's still some level of control. Then genetics, well, you kind of have your genetics, but there's also, within the activities and choices, how you take care of your body, how healthy are you? What foods are you eating? Just all those things can affect how your genetics present themselves. And there's a lot of research on that our choices actually can affect how individual genes present themselves. And for example, somebody may be born with a genetic propensity to be an alcoholic. It doesn't mean they're going to be an alcoholic, but their genes are such that they are more likely, if exposed to alcohol, to become addicted to it. But their choices influence whether or not that probability is going to present itself. Does that make sense?
Most definitely.
They're like literally in every area, there still is influence, but it all comes back to you have to focus on the choices and your activities in order to have the influence on the area, on the other parts, you know?
Yeah. And that goes back to, you know, your choices. If you focus 50% on becoming the person you want to be, that gene, whether it's addictiveness or whatever, the chances of it presenting itself are a lot less, which means the success that you can achieve in this world, or whatever that is, you have a greater chance for getting the genes. Because if you're good, the chances of good genes presenting themselves are a lot higher.
Exactly. Yes, totally. 100%.
And that goes back to health too, right? Even genes of health. If you have a disease in your family and you're really healthy, sure, that gene could affect you, but the chances become a lot less.
Exactly. Yep.
I love that. Wow, this is amazing. So let's say somebody's listening right now and they're like, man, Kody, I want to become this person and I want to do this. And yeah, I want to achieve this list, but I don't know where to start. How would somebody effectively set a foundation for their life to build upon?
Yeah. So here's what I do. When I'm like, okay, I feel like I need to be better, but I'm not sure in what area, and I don't want to overwhelm myself. Like, I want to actually make this work. How can I do this? Part of this comes from like what we talked about earlier, of choosing one thing, you know. So as you're prepping your New Year's resolutions, make sure that you're, you know, focusing on one thing, but also, since we're talking about it right now, you know, don't wait for that. I'm not sure exactly what day this episode is going to air on, but don't wait for this New Year's resolutions. Or if you're hearing this episode far in the future, don't wait for the next year's New Year's resolutions. You know, like start whatever you're doing. Like, you don't have to wait for some magical day that it's going to be more likely that you succeed. Like, you choose. You know, you are the master of your own fate. You know, you are the captain of your. I'm probably totally butchering that. That poem. You get the idea. You know, the Invictus poem. So focusing on one thing, but even then, it's like, okay, well, what one thing do I focus on? There's so many different things. You know, all the things we've talked about. I don't need to repeat them all. There's so many different areas that we've already talked about that can kind of feel like shiny object syndrome, you know, and maybe some of them you've tried before. Maybe some of you haven't tried before. Maybe some of them you feel like you should do, like you feel almost an obligation because people have told you like, oh, you should be doing this. Or maybe you feel some kind of social pressure because like, oh, well, all my friends are doing this, you know, X, Y, Z. Whatever you choose, you should be choosing something, and not to should on you, but what would be a good idea for you to choose something that you genuinely are excited about and believe in. If you're working on a habit because you feel an obligation to, and that's the primary feeling or emotion you have about the habit, you're not likely going to do well with that. Now, in some cases, may there be a habit or something in your life that you have to do consistently because maybe it's part of your job, or maybe there's some requirement, or maybe it's like, you know, like my wife and I, we don't, bedtime with our kids is often a difficult time. You know, it's like one of the hardest parts of our day is getting our kids in bed. And that's a regular thing we have to do every day. And that's just something we have to do, you know? So sure, there's things you have to do in your life that just are obligations, and we can't just choose, okay, we're not going to put our kids to bed. I guess we could choose that, but then, gosh, that would be interesting, you know? So those things aside, when you are proactively looking at what can I do new that I haven't done before, pick something that you are genuinely excited about, not just because you feel an obligation or pressure from others to do that thing. That's really important. And also part of that excitement should be that you believe this is going to work. Even the best strategy, if you simply just are skeptical about it or don't believe it, decreases its likelihood of succeeding. You know, it's kind of like oh my gosh, I just forgot the word. When in a study, oh my gosh, when there's medicines that are testing, and when they give you the fake medicine, I studied this.
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about? It's
yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I feel like it starts with a P. This is going to drive me nuts. Anyways, yeah, that effect of like how, you know, if you believe something, it will work even if you were taking the sugar pill. You know, this is kind of the opposite effect of that, where even though you maybe are taking the real pill, not that we're talking about taking, you know, pills or medicines, but, you know, as far as doing a strategy that maybe really is even effective, if you are like, if you're skeptical about it, or if you're like highly doubting it's going to work, that's not doing you a favor in making it work. And if it's too much for you to like get over that and believe that it's going to work, pick something that you already believe is going to work. You know, even if you've never done it before, that you have some kind of general idea about it. Like, yeah, I really think this is going to work. That will, you know, speak magnitudes to your likelihood of being able to succeed with that thing. All that kind of as a prep for your mind of what things to think about. Here's the process that I use when I am picking which habit to focus on. A lot of people will tell you like, oh, you need to like come up with your why. You need to pick a habit and then come up with your why. I actually do this totally backwards and different. I pick my who and then draw it back to what habit I'm going to work on. So I start by imagining somebody I know in my life who I really look up to right now. It could be a business leader, could be a parent, could be a religious leader, you know, could be Jesus, could be whoever right now you really look up to for one reason or another. Think about them. Think about their qualities. Not just that you look up to them, but the specific qualities that you look up to about them. Maybe it's that they are really good listeners and make people feel good about themselves, you know, when they're around them. Maybe it's that they are really studious and they read a lot of books, you know, and you really admire that about them, how wise they are because of all the books they've read or something. Maybe it's that they're extremely proactive and productive and they use their time well. Whatever that is, write down what those specific qualities are that you look up to. Then ask yourself, what do they likely do on a regular basis that has resulted in them being this kind of person? What activities do they likely do on a regular basis? Or maybe did they do when they were getting started that ultimately have resulted in them having these specific qualities or personality traits, you know, or skills? So then think about that, write down what those activities are or might be. You don't have to know exactly what they are. You can play pretend, you know. People, even if it's like a big business leader, you might actually be able to find a blog article somewhere that talks about what their daily routine is, you know, and you could look that up. Or if it's someone you personally know, you could ask them. Maybe it's somebody you don't know if you've never met, and there's not a way to find out. Maybe it's someone from history or something, and you don't know what they did in the morning, or you know, like you just don't know what their habits were specifically. Then you can guess. Just ask yourself, kind of tap into your intuition of like, okay, if I were to guess, what might they have done regularly that could lead to this kind of result? Write those things down. Then at this point, I kind of just look at what those different things are, because ultimately at this point, we've identified habits that they have or led to the habits that they now have. And so you're looking at probably at least 2, 3, 4 different options of habits that have led to someone you really look up to having qualities that you really admire. So I look at those and then I ask myself, you know, which one is really exciting to me? Do I believe in, kind of like the things we talked about, and that I think is really doable for me, that I could actually make happen. And so I'll pick one of those, kind of circle it, and then I decide that's the one I'm going to work on. And then there's kind of a whole process that I have for what to do once you've picked that. In fact, this whole process I'm talking you through, I actually have a mini course of that anyone who subscribes to my newsletter gets in the welcome email. And so if you want to check out habitexamples.com, and subscribe to my newsletter, there's actually a mini course you'll get that walks you through kind of this process, and then how to make a habit plan once you've decided what habit you do want to work on. But that's kind of how I think about it, and it's totally backwards and different than anyone I've ever heard in how they pick a habit. Yeah, that's what I would recommend to someone who's wanting to get started and they don't know where to start.
I love that. And for all the listeners or watchers, seriously, go subscribe to that, because I have, and I love the different perspective on habit building. One, habits have been talked about for thousands of years, and you bring a different perspective. And that's what we need, is new perspectives to really make change, right? So yeah, go subscribe to that newsletter.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's and going back to, so I've developed a prosperous life methodology, what I believe it takes to essentially live a prosperous life. And my last is impact. And a part of impact, what I believe, is that you need to put you first. Because you can't be 100% for yourself, for anybody else, if you're not 100% for you first.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you agree with that? Disagree with that?
No, yeah, I definitely stand by. I think if we're going to help other people and make a difference in other people's lives, the one hugely impactful way to do that is by increasing our capacity to help other people. And can we help somebody at the level that we're right now? I don't think we need to wait until we're a perfect person before we can help somebody. But if we're going to make an impact and a lasting impression on people around us and the world, we need to become our best selves in the process to be able to do that. And because you mentioned that, I just really want to quickly share. This actually applies to everything we we're just talking about with picking your habit. A simple system you can actually use if it's too hard to decide like which one is most exciting to you or whatever. I like to think about things like analytically and logically. And there's this cool system I learned a while ago that's really cool for making any kind of decision. And it's called ICE, and it's a method of prioritization. So it stands for impact, confidence, and ease. So when you are deciding between a few different options, you can go through and rate each option or each habit that you're considering working on how impactful it would be on yours and other people's lives, how confident you are in that you would be able to develop that habit, and how easy it would be, or how easy you can make it to adopt into your life. And so 3 just basic criteria that you can kind of rate it and make it really easy to make a informed decision about which one to move.
I absolutely love that. And it's a system that breaks things down, as you mentioned, to make good decisions, but also kind of breaks it down into your commitment level, right? After you break it down in those 3 steps, if you recognize it's not as easy as you think it will be, maybe it's not putting it off the table, but let's say the habit that you want to make is working out for 1 hour, 5 days a week. You're like, I've never worked out before. Like, this sounds hard. Mm-hmm. It's like, maybe you just start with 15 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's kind of some of what I cover in that mini course for those that want to subscribe is, just really like simplifying things. And so not only just doing one thing, but like almost with a guarantee, any habit you pick and your first instinct of the standard you're going to set yourself for that habit probably is too high. Just because we overestimate, our ability, we overestimate our willpower, basically is what we do. And so basically just being able to simplify that down, usually cut it in half or even cut it in 1/4 of what you originally expect that you'll be able to do.
And so on.
Oh, yeah. So just the other day, I just saw this quote from Bruce Lee the other day that long-term consistency trumps short-term intensity. And so, absolutely. When you're setting a new habit, we tend to overestimate. We think, I'll be able to do this an hour every day. It's like, well, why not start with something that's like almost impossible to fail? Like, that's really what you should be thinking is, how can I make this virtually impossible to fail when I start out? Because if I can build the habit of doing 15 minutes a day, and I do that for a month or 2 months in a row, it's a piece of cake to add on to that and say, you know what, today I'm going to do 30 minutes. Like, so much easier to add on to an existing habit. The hardest part is turning anything, even a small thing, into a regular habit.
I love that. And that comes down to the study of grit, right?
Totally.
And the studies across, whether this is business or mental health or being a good parent or whatever it is, the determining factor isn't talent. And as you mentioned it isn't circumstances. So it's not if you were born into a multi-million-dollar family. It isn't based upon genes. It literally is the choice to say, you know what, I want to accomplish this. I'm here. And if I do X, Y, and Z habit for a long period of time, again, it becomes the when and not an if.
Totally.
So I love that. Long-term consistency will make you win in whatever habit you're trying to build.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that. So for the listeners, to kind of bring it back to me and you, what habit would you say you're trying to develop at this time?
Good question. So one that I actually am kind of excited about that I recently worked on. Normally, I really focus on building good habits. There's, definitely a space to talk about breaking bad habits. I just generally enjoy more talking about what new good habits can we build. Because I also believe that if you're trying to break a bad habit, often the best way to do that is by building a good new habit. Because sometimes that will just push out, the other bad habit that we had, or replaces the time that we would have done that, But anyways, I happened to recently be working on kind of breaking a bad habit of mine, which was that for years, as long as I can remember, at pretty much every meal, I always would eat seconds. I'd go back and get another plate of food, even if I wasn't hungry, just because I enjoy food. And if it tastes good, I would just eat more, even when I wasn't hungry. But it wasn't just occasionally, literally every single meal, always, and not just seconds, sometimes third, sometimes even fourths. And, you can see me, it's not like I'm super overweight or anything, or that I really struggle with my health in that way. I feel very fortunate that my genes, there's the gene influence. I've got some genes that definitely help me there. But I didn't feel good about doing that. It didn't feel good. And it actually, what caught my attention was that I got on a scale one day and I was at the highest weight that I'd ever been. And again, normally even with weight, I tend to go with how I feel. And I knew I wasn't feeling good, which is why I chose to weigh myself. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm at the worst that I've ever been. So then I decided, you know what, I'm going to spend a month doing a 1 plate challenge. I'm just going to eat 1 plate of food at every meal for a month. And so you can hear, it's not even that I was focusing on breaking the bad habit. I was focusing on a challenge of eating 1 plate per meal, and not that I wanted to do this forever, but I thought I wanted to do a short-term challenge simply to break that habit of always just kind of almost compulsively just eating another plate or two of food. Because I don't think that seconds are always bad. It's just that I wanted to be in control. I wanted to be able to consciously decide, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to have a little bit more today. Or no, I'm full, and recognizing I don't need more food right now, And so the goal was not to lose weight. The goal was to gain back the control and be conscious of the decisions I was making about my food at every meal. And I did this for a month, and it was actually surprisingly easier than I thought it would be, because I was still eating food. I didn't cut any food out of my life. Literally, I was still eating ice cream, cookies, all my favorite, yummy foods. I was still having cereal for breakfast, not every day, but, I was still eating all the foods that I like. There was nothing that I cut out. And in fact, during this month, this wasn't intentional, but I actually practically stopped exercising for this whole month. I got out of my habit of working out during this month because winter started. And anyways, there's other stories there, but I was not working out almost at all this whole month. And even though the goal wasn't weight loss, this one thing, I lost about 10 pounds. And I felt so much better. I mean, literally within and actually the 10 pounds didn't take a month. It only took 2 weeks. It took about 2 weeks that I lost 10 pounds, and I felt so much better every day. My body just felt really good from doing that one thing. And so that's kind of a recent one of mine that I was really excited about. I am really excited about that. That now I'm transitioning into, I'm kind of out of the challenge phase of it, and I'm just trying to be conscious of, like I said, kind of being intentional with, okay, am I still hungry? Am I not hungry? Or is this just an occasion I'm just going to choose because it's Christmas, or because it's, a holiday, like, or Thanksgiving, like, you know what, sure, I'll just have an extra because, but it's not always automatic.
I love that. And that's something we can learn off of. Again, it's those 1% changes. One small thing can make a world of a difference for all of us. And like you said, it's not that you looked bad, it's that you just felt bad.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's just the awareness in itself. It's, don't look at external factors of what you should change in your own life. Ask yourself how you feel.
Yeah.
If you feel good about your knowledge, maybe you don't need to develop a habit of reading a book a month.
Yeah.
Maybe it's cool, in terms of society, but maybe there's a different habit for you.
Yeah.
So ask yourself how you feel.
Exactly. And then even, just a totally different perspective, as you mentioned books, there's, I was just reading recently, there's this whole culture about, you read an entire book. If you start a book, you finish it. And if you don't, there's almost this like guilt or shame of like, oh, I started reading that, but I never finished. Like if your habit was, I just want to study and I don't even need to read the whole book, because I'm thinking nonfiction, personal development books, recently, that's actually what I've been doing. I've been taking a handful of books that I've either read or haven't read, and I'm just opening to certain pages and reading a couple pages, and I've loved it. Like, I'm not sitting down like, okay, I'm going to read this whole thing right now. I've just been opening to certain chunks and getting these gold nuggets from all these different books without putting the pressure on myself of, I have to read this whole book or else I feel bad about myself,
Yeah, I love that.
Kind of random.
Sometimes it's just that. It's not the book. It's not that mental, if I do this, then I'm enough. It's the, right now I don't need to read a book. I just need to become knowledgeable on a personal development, how to set goals, whatever the case is. And you even pick up one book and read one chapter. It's like,
exactly. You may not need an entire book. You really may not,
And personally, the way I do books, I love books personally. That's what makes me feel good though, right?
Yeah.
So when I pick out a book, nonfiction is what I read. I'll look at the chapters in advance and I'll highlight the chapters I actually need to read.
I like that.
The other ones I let go.
Huh. I like that.
Does it mean I will never read that book, right? Maybe in the future I pick the book up again and then I recognize that chapter I need. But don't just read to waste time.
Exactly. You know what you need right now, and you don't need to, you want to focus your energy on what you need most right now, urgently.
Exactly. So, man, I could go for hours with you, Kody. So how can the followers be of service to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, my goal right now is really, like Braiden mentioned in the beginning, I want to help 1,000 people build great new habits. And I'm not even selling anything right now. I just want to help people through this weekly newsletter that I send out. So if you're sitting here going, man, I really want to work on habits and be better, or maybe you don't have time for personal development books, but you still want little snippets of good information to lift you up and inspire you, that's exactly what I send every week, every Tuesday. You can literally read it in less than 5 minutes. It's totally free. I never spam, and you can unsubscribe whenever, but it's my way of, staying connected with you and supporting you. And I don't expect anything in return. I just, want to be there to help you. So, like I said before, go to habitexamples.com, check it out. And again, there's a mini course you'll get when you subscribe in the welcome email that shows up in your inbox. So that'd be the best thing I could hope for, is that you receive that from me and then you pass it along to somebody else.
I love that. And I mean, you're making an impact. We're young, but the capacity that we have, the ability and the capacity that you hold, you have a true power to impact way more than 1,000 lives. So I love that you're starting with that one goal. And honestly, I love that you're just serving out of your own heart. It's not any expectations tied to it. You just want to serve. And I believe that's what drives somebody far, is when they just want to serve. And unfortunately, it's a rare thing nowadays. So good on you there.
Appreciate
now, that. Last question. This is a question I ask everybody.
Okay.
But what's the definition of a prosperous life to you?
For that, I would defer to a quote from, I think, I don't want to quote this person wrong. I think it's Gandhi, who said, I'll be paraphrasing because I don't have it right in front of me, but it's something like, when your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions are in harmony. That's what I would say is a prosperous life, was when your thoughts, your actions, and your emotions, when all of that is in harmony. It doesn't mean the world is in harmony, but when you can be in harmony with yourself, that you are striving to be what you believe, be merciful and compassionate to yourself when you make those mistakes, try your best, to live in line with what you believe is right and good, and that you're striving for that, following that inner compass of yours. I think that is kind of the core of a prosperous life.
I absolutely love that. Thank you so much. And again, for everybody listening, thank you guys so much for showing up today. This one podcast can truly transform your entire lives. And my call to action today for you guys is to go subscribe to Kody's newsletter. It's helped me in my habit building, and I know it'll help yours, as it does offer a different perspective. With that in mind, Kody, do you have any last words?
No, just pick something and start today. My biggest regrets are when I've waited, days, weeks, months, or years before starting a habit. Make it easy, do something simple, and do something today. Just be 1% better today than you were yesterday. Not 1% better than somebody else, 1% better than yourself yesterday. And you'll be on the right track for, being happy, living that good, proper, prosperous life.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Kody. And you guys all have a wonderful rest of your day.